Martin Murray versus Nuhu Lawal. Lawal came in as a late notice opponent. He came into this fight on 3 days, and from the opening bell, the size difference here was evident. Martin Murray towered over this guy. There was a huge difference in terms of height, a huge difference in terms of physical build. During the fight, the commentary team said that Lawal could make 154, and I believe that to be the case looking at the size difference between these two blokes, because Martin Murray is not an overly big super middleweight. Don't believe the hype. Look back at his fight when he fought George Groves. George Groves was a substantially bigger man in there than Martin Murray. Martin Murray was a big middleweight. He's an average size super middleweight, and this Lawal was too small really to be in the ring with him. Now, the fight started and Lawal came out swinging for the fences. He was charging forward. He was reckless. He, to me, looked like a slugger. I thought this was going to be relatively easy work for Martin Murray. I thought Murray would be able to deal with a guy like Lawal by getting on his back foot, using his movement and establishing his jab. We know Murray has technical skills at a decent level. We've seen him utilise it in upper echelon fights, even recently against Arthur Abraham. We've seen him be able to establish that jab, to stick and to move. And when he was up against a guy like Lawal, who was a far smaller guy, who to me seemed to be completely lacking in fundamental technique, I thought that what Murray would do is keep the fight at range and jab his head off. But that's not what happened at all. Lawal was able to push him back. Lawal was able to get him on his back foot, and Lawal brought a high pace and high energy to this fight, which made Murray look very awkward at times, and to me looked like Murray was struggling in the fight really. I was very disappointed by Martin Murray's performance here. He did certain things well. He landed the odd counterpunch nicely. He worked the body quite well. And when he was actually working from range and constructing his punches cleanly and crisply, he was catching Lawal with some nice punches. But the difficulty is, once again, Martin Murray has got drawn into a scrappy, messy, horrible fight with a guy who's not in his league. We see this time and time again. Murray fighting nicely, but not doing quite enough against the top opposition, and Murray fighting terribly and just about doing enough against a mediocre opposition. And don't believe what the Sky commentary team was saying. This Lawal is a mediocre opponent. You know, they were saying, I'd like to see him in against the top guys at 154 pounds. You've got to be kidding me. This Lawal, don't get me wrong, he was credible in certain ways. He showed decent durability, a decent engine, good heart, good will to win. He was a likeable fighter. But in terms of skill, in terms of technique, in terms of the ability to block and defend punches, in terms of the ability to throw a jab, this Lawal was very average. You know, very average indeed. I think guys like Liam Williams at 154 pounds, or even Liam Smith would walk through him. For me, he was not a star in the making like the Sky commentary team seemed to be trying to sell him as. Don't get me wrong, he put in a good performance given his lack of notice for the fight, but to me the skills just weren't there, and Martin Murray was drawn into fighting at his levels. Martin Murray was drawn into fighting inside a phone booth, throwing punches up the middle, trying to work the body, when really what he needed to be doing was using his boxing from range, was moving around the smaller man, was keeping him at range and establishing that jab, and Murray was completely unable to do that. For me, a classic and unsurprising performance from Martin Murray. Whenever he drops to this level of opponent, it's a complete mess. And the Sky commentary team, for me, had a really poor outing on this fight. I believe I heard Paul Smith at one point say, and I can't 100% confirm this because I wasn't flicking through my Twitter at the time, and it's borderline unbelievable, but I'm pretty sure I heard Paul Smith say something to the effect of, Martin Murray has the speed of a middleweight, but the power of a super middleweight. Later on in the fight, we heard Adam Smith, saying, he's a decent puncher, is Martin Murray. For me, the sort of hype around Martin Murray, was farcical. And at the end, they were discussing, could Martin Murray win a world title? And the guys were saying, yeah, potentially he could win a world title. To be fair, Tony Bellew wasn't quite as bad as the other two. Tony Bellew said, in his perspective, he thinks Murray would struggle to win a world title in the mix at super middleweight. Bellew also made one or other 2 points, in the fight. Murray was complaining a lot that this Lawal was coming forward and lunging with his head. And Bellew said something to the effect of, he should stop moaning, and every time Lawal comes in, he should take a step back and catch him. Which I thought was actually a fairly good observation from Tony Bellew. So maybe we'll give Tony Bellew a slight pass on his commentary tonight. I thought he was better than Paul Smith and Adam Smith. But yeah, some of the Sky commentary, I mean, if you were listening to this fight without the TV on, you would presume that, Martin Murray was a power-punching speedster en route to winning a world title, and that this Lawal was, I don't know, the 154-pound Canelo Alvarez who'd just been brought in at too short a notice. I thought it was a poor showing from the Sky commentary team who didn't really do the fight too much justice in terms of what was going on in there. Murray, for me, very, very limited interest in seeing him in these kind of fights. And I've been saying this for a good while. Very limited interest. He's a guy who can put in a decent performance if he stepped up to world top 10 level. He can perform with credit. But these sort of opponents, he gets so sloppy, so scrappy. The speed isn't there, the clean work isn't there, the power has never been there. Don't listen to the commentary team. Martin Murray is a light puncher. We had Lawal, he's so much bigger than Lawal and couldn't stop him. He caught Lawal with some big punches and couldn't stop him. I think it was the 9th or the 10th round, Lawal looked out on his feet, yet was able to come back into the fight and plug on. And Murray just didn't have what it took to get him out of there and to stop him. Another comedy moment. I gave Tony Bellew some props earlier on. Tony Bellew said something like, Paul Smith would have been able to stop Lawal because Paul Smith punches through the target and carries a different kind of power to Martin Murray. Bloody hell, I hope we don't have to watch Paul Smith versus Lawal at some point because, that really would be painful. All in all, final observations in this fight. The scoring, for me, I don't have too much of a problem with the scoring. I'm imagining now that people are pissed off with the scoring and people are saying, the fight was a lot closer than that. I actually think this Lawal was very limited, and I think whilst he was bringing a lot of pressure and a lot of pace and a lot of desire, in terms of the construction of his punches and what he was actually landing, it was average. I think Murray did deserve to win the fight on balance, and I don't have a huge issue with the margin of victory. The problem for me is not anything to do with that, but it's what Martin Murray showed in there. Is there decline in his game? Does the fighter who fought Lawal tonight still have it in him to put in a performance like he did against Arthur Abraham when they fought? Because that George Groves fight was a tough fight. That Arthur Abraham fight was a tough fight. He's fought Golovkin, he's fought Sergio Martinez. There's all these other fights back in the day. What I'm getting at is there are a lot of miles on the clock with Martin Murray. And for me, his performances are showing a consistent and gradual decline. The so-called speed, it's not there. The so-called power isn't there. Don't get me wrong, Murray is schooled. He knows his way around the ring. Against less experienced opponents, he has a knack of finding the right punch. He places his punches well. But for me, his tendency to get sucked into these scraps consistently and his inability to use his advantages in the ring are going to prove very, very costly. And I just wonder if, at this stage of his career, let's be honest, Martin Murray's been a nearly man throughout his career, even at his peak. At this stage of his career, do I believe he's got what it takes to overturn the odds, to upset the apple cart, and to finally get that world title? Based on this performance, I'm afraid I do not. And that's unfortunate, because, I like Martin Murray. He's a likeable performer. He's a guy who's had some hard luck stories in his life. He's been on the scene for what feels like ages, and he's a guy we'd all like to see doing well. But based on tonight's performance, it's going to be a long, long road for him. And, the performance he put on tonight, there'll be people out there licking their lips at the prospect of fighting him. You know, there really would be. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts. I've rambled for far too long on this fight anyway. Let me know your thoughts. What was your take on the scoring in this fight? What was your take on the commentary in this fight? And more importantly, what was your take on the action in this fight? Do leave your observations in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed the video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Many thanks for watching.